Hi all, welcome to a presentation on Constructivist Approach. So Constructivism is not a new theory. It has been widely discussed, implemented, evaluated, criticized approach over a period of last few decades. So now let us go into the details of various approaches which follows the theory of constructivism. So first of all, let us see what is constructivism. Generally, it is perceived as a psychological theory, but it is more a philosophy. Constructivism can be considered more as a philosophy because it's a viewpoint that is of the viewpoint on construction of knowledge, the process of learning, and this philosophy looks into it's an approach of seeing the world, experiencing the world, and hence it is considered more as a philosophy. The nature of reality for constructivism is in the form of mental representation, and the concept of knowledge is or the knowledge is constructed by the individual themselves or individually construct knowledge, and the type of interaction shared or negotiated, and the nature of science or the nature of activity is meaning making activity. So these are some basic aspects of a philosophical thought which is satisfied by the postulations of constructivism, and hence it is termed more as a philosophy than mere as a psychological theory. So now let us see what are the basic assumptions of constructivism. Constructivism laid most emphasis on context as well as learning. Both are mutually dependent. Context as well as language. So the language has of prime importance in learning, and learning happens in specific context. And in addition to this, interaction between the learners and the learner with some more experienced person or a more knowledgeable person. So that interaction means meaningful involvement. Sometimes it is interaction with a learning material. That also is a type of involvement. Not always the interaction between two persons, but the interaction between a learner and a material, learning material. And assistance of an experienced person, that's another important assumption, that help from a more knowledgeable person, an experienced person, not specifically mentioned as a teacher. It can be a teacher, it can be a peer, or it can be some other person who is having more knowledge or more experience regarding the particular aspect. Then another important assumption of constructivism is learning goals. means learner responsibility. And contrary to many other approaches for teaching as well as learning, Constructivism laid more emphasis on responsibility of learners. So it's a learner directed approach. There is no scope for teaching in constructivism. The usage of constructivist teaching itself is some kind of awkwardness because it's a learner initiated or learner managed approach. So learner has responsibility to handle his or her own learning or the knowledge construction process. So these are some of the basic assumptions of constructivism. The context in which learning happens, the language which act as backbone for learning, then interaction between members in a group or interaction with the material for learning, then assistance from other persons as well as learning goals. Then there are two main streams of constructivism. One is a cognitive stream of constructivism and the other is social stream of constructivism. Both streams has their own uh, advantages or their own postulations. Both these streams or the proponents of both these streams, they have their own claims on this is more significant and this is more significant. So as a whole, both these streams are inclusive in construction. There of course is cognitive process and it is essential for social inputs to make learning or knowledge more comprehensive. So we are not going into the detail of such streams. So the three major views we are going to discuss in this presentation is the views of Piaget, then that of Ausubel and Vygotsky. So their perceptions on construction. The Piaget generally considered as a proponent of cognitive view of constructivism. The others also are belong to that category, Ausubel as well as Vygotsky. Construction is a cognitive process, means it's a conscious process. We are consciously doing all these things. That's why it can be categorized as a cognitive approach to learning or knowledge generation. And according to Piaget, he is well known for his developmental stages, the theory of stage dependent learning. So that is fundamental concept regarding his theory, the stage dependent theory. So the level of abstraction is progressively increases according to the increase in age of the learner. So that developmental stage and learning is mutually interdependent according to Piaget. And he emphasized on the presence of certain specific cognitive structures, and these cognitive structures are responsible for that construction of knowledge of or to acquire something new or to learning that to happen. And he also mentioned the significance of existing knowledge and new knowledge. Means to an existing knowledge, the new knowledge is added up. For the existing cognitive structure, the new structure is formed on the existing structure or existing foundation. Just like we are making some buildings. First we make some foundation, then we are constructing on it. Similarly, a similar type of uh, idea proposed by Piaget. And according to him, language is only a means of expression, expressing things. Not much significance to language. It's also for always for expression only. Then his approach is termed as bottom-up approach because it starts from pieces, a pieces to whole approach. So Piagetian view of learning or to construction is categorized or it's termed as bottom-up approach. Now let us see what are the views of Ausubel. So Ausubel proposed that whatever learning, it should be meaningful. There is no meaning in rote learning without understanding the meaning of something and the meaning of how it can be applied. So that's his concept. He is also the view of a cognitive construction, and that learning is an active cognitive process. And he proposed an idea. He said that when I was asked to limit all the educational psychological theories in one sentence, I would say like this: ascertain what the learner already knows and teach her or him according to that existing knowledge. So he also stressed on that previous knowledge that the learner already has, and to only new learning, new knowledge built upon that existing knowledge. So that we have to ascertain for a meaningful learning. And his approach is a top-down approach, and his famous contribution is the advanced organizers for setting a stage or setting a foundation, a platform for appropriate learning. Then Vygotsky view, the widely discussed uh, approach to learning as well as knowledge, or on constructivism. And according to him, language acts as basis of thought. It is central to learning because through language we perceive things as well as we express things. So all our expressions are based on our thoughts. So that's why he proposed that language as basis of thought. So a proper language, adequate language is essential for accurate perception, accurate understanding, then accurate thinking and specific expressions. The experiences shall be put into words for better understanding. So that's another remarkable proposal by Vygotsky, that uh, the direct experience is inadequate when it is not supported by appropriate description or language. So, proper language is essential as a supporting factor or a facilitating factor along with any type of direct experiences. So there is some misconception regarding this Vygotskian proposal or constructivism that learner will construct everything. We will provide them, the teacher will provide them some such situation, such materials. So when they will get some direct experience, they will learn from that. It is not like that Vygotsky proposed. He proposed that such essential description using appropriate language is essential. Then he proposed two type of concepts. Concepts that are spontaneous and concepts that are non-spontaneous or scientific. The spontaneous concepts are those concepts which are experiencing in our daily life. That learner experiences those concepts spontaneously in their daily life. And the non-spontaneous or scientific concepts are those concepts that we are instructing them, or those concepts students constructed as a process of instruction. And naturally there will be connection and interpretation between these two types of concepts. Then only the real knowledge construction will occur according to Vygotsky, because students already have some concepts on the basis of their daily life. Similarly, those Piaget and Ausubel mentioned about the existing knowledge, so that spontaneous and non-spontaneous concepts and its connection between the two. And he also mentioned a specific area, zone of proximal development, and he identified a specific area for development, and this area can be explored with an assistance of an experienced or an elder or a more knowledgeable person's assistance. So a learner can acquire or explore a specific area, up to a specific area, and beyond which the learner require assistance from some other persons who having more knowledge about that specific object. So ZPD, that's also a well-known contribution. And the process of learning, the process of construction proposed by Vygotsky is termed as scaffolding. So the three approaches we regarding Piaget, it was bottom-up approach, and for Ausubel it is top-down approach, and for Vygotsky it is scaffolding. Then according to constructivism, learning is personal, because it is the responsibility of the learner. So the learner determine what should I learn, why should I learn, and how I can learn this. So that's why it is termed as, in constructivism, learning as personal, and it is active and at the same time not deliberate, because only when the learner is active he or she can construct some knowledge. And it is not, we cannot, nobody can impose somebody to learn something. Each learner has to learn by their self. So hence it is not deliberate. It is a conscious process. It's a cognitive process. That's why it's a cognitive process. Because we are consciously doing something, and then only it become an active involvement process, and learning as contextual. So the change in context greatly influence the process of learning, and individual making sense of things. When only learning happens, what the individual senses perceive things correctly, appropriately. So for that, we already said that appropriate language, appropriate vocabulary is essential for proper perception, and that proper perception leads to proper understanding, and proper understanding help us enables for construction of correct or adequate knowledge. So then only individual can uh, make sense of things, make things meaningful. Then regarding knowing, that's the process of knowing. That's the process of constructing knowledge. It is proposed by Glaserfield in 95. This process of knowing is influenced, or it is built up by thinking, and a social interaction is required for knowing. So the line of social constructivism means some kind of uh, involvement from other persons in a group, or an elder person or a peer. So basically human beings are social, so some kind of social interaction is required for knowing. And cognition is functional and adaptive, and it shall be what all things we are going to learn, we are constructing, being constructed, that shall be functional. There is no meaning in acquiring theoretical knowledge. It has no value. And those things shall be functional. We have to, we are always saying about literacy and functional literacy. So, mere acquisition of how to write letters is not literacy. And how we can use this ability in a constructive way, in a meaningful way, then only it becomes functional. So cognition is functional as well as adaptive. So we have to use that knowledge appropriately by changing situation. What we will do when all the education institutions are closed down due to COVID-19, how we interact with learners. So it's a new situation. So the knowledge that we acquire shall be capable of adapting easily. That also is significant in the process of knowing. So how we are knowing is heavily influenced such kind of adaptation. Then purpose of cognition is to organize experiential world. So that's the purpose of knowing. It is for organizing things in this experiential world or daily life experiences. So these are some uh, postulations of von Glaserfield regarding knowing in the line of constructivism. So that knowing is built up by thinking uh, with the help of social interaction, and it shall be functional and adaptive, and the purpose is to organize or knowledge in this living world. on the experiential world. And regarding student conception, constructivism identified two sources for student conception from where students acquire concept. One is intuitive and the other is instruction. As mentioned in Vygotskian views of that two kinds of concepts. So spontaneous and non-spontaneous. So similarly, intuitive means acquired from experience, daily life experience. And instruction is the instruction what we are giving through our educational institutions or by some other formal or other settings. So there are two sources for developing, constructing concepts for every learners. Then the status of these concepts depends on three conditions. What will be the status of these concepts? Whether a misconception happens. So the conditions are: does the concept meaningful? Is it meaningful to the learner? And it truthful? And it is useful. So these three conditions, that meaningfulness, truthfulness and usefulness of, are the three conditions determine the status of a concept. And when these conditions are properly met, students are able to, or the learners are able to construct an appropriate or an accurate or a correct conception. So these are some aspects regarding constructivism. The three major views of Piaget, Ausubel and Vygotsky were discussed, and the language, the previous knowledge, the context, interaction, all these are highly valid in the case of construction. So it's an active process, it's an interactive process, it's a cumulative process, it's an adaptive way of knowing things or learning things, and there is a very limited or no scope for teaching in terms of constructivism, because it's developed by learner themselves, but assistance of an experienced, more knowledgeable person is required for proper construction. So that's all about these constructivist approaches. So thanks for watching the presentation. Thank you all.